Richard Rameriz was born in 1960 in El Paso, Texas. He grew up having his father, his mother, and his four other siblings present. Richard had an abusive father growing up, and when they did something he didn't like, he would physically beat them. Growing up, Richard would rather hang out with his cousin Michael than his other siblings. He claimed to be the right-hand man of Satan. Richard went to Thomas Jefferson High School. He dropped out less than a year left and moved to Los Angeles. While he was in school, he got a job at the local Holiday Inn, which he then developed habits such as stealing from people while they were sleeping. Growing up, Richard had a best friend named Nicholas. Richard might have been deeply affected by the death of his best friend in a gruesome traffic accident in 1980. When Richard was in 5th grade, he was diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy. He also had other medical issues like being hyper and an aggressive child. When Richard was 12 years old, he watched his cousin shoot his wife in the face over an argument. Growing up, he suffered from ADHD and multiple head injuries, resulting in seizures. Later, he was then diagnosed with conduct disorder for his adolescent deviant behavior. By the age of 22, he began frequently using cocaine. He would often commit burglaries to support his drug addiction, and then accompanied by murders, attempted murders, rapes, and assaults.
From June 1984 until August 1985, the state of California was under attack by a psychopath. He burglarized, raped, and murdered his way from Gliselle Park to Diamond Bar. Police had no clue where their next victim would be until their body was found. On June 20th, 1984, Richard murdered and raped his first known victim, Jenny Vincow. He then silently waited until March 17th, 1985, before striking again and starting a reign of terror over the state of California. He attacked Maria Hernandez, who survived being shot in the face, but unfortunately her roommate, Dale Yoshi Okazaki, was fatally shot in the head. Then only a few hours later, Veronica Yu was shot while being pulled out of her car. On March 17, 1985, entering a previously burglarized home of Vincent and Maxine Zazzara, Richard killed Vincent and beats Maxine, who later manages to escape her binds, but Richard shoots her 3 times before gouging out her eyes and leaving them in a jewelry box. May 14th, 1985. He breaks into Bill and Lillian Doy's home and shoots and Bill unconscious. He rapes Lillian and then searches for valuables. Bill unfortunately dies later in hospital. May 29th, 1985. Again, Richard breaks into another home. This time it's Mabel Bell and Florence Yang. He beats Bell with a hammer and rapes Bell. Ladies were found 2 days later. Mrs. Bell passed away from her injuries. June 30th. This time Richard broke into Carol Kyle's home, rapes and binds her son close to her. He demands the son to know where the valuables are before fleeing. July 2nd, 1985. He breaks into Mary Louise Cannon's home, stabs her with a kitchen knife. July 5th. He breaks into Whitney Bennett's home and attacks her with a tire iron, tries to strangle her, but the cords spark, Richard flees, and Bennett survives. On July 7th, Richard breaks into the home of Joyce Nelson and beats her to death. He flees after vandalizing the home, but not before leaving a shoe print on her face. A few hours later, he enters the home of Sophie Dickman, where he handcuffs and attempts to sexually assault her. He ends up fleeing with jewelry. On July the 20th, he breaks into the home of Leila and Maxim Needling. He murders them both with a machete and a gun, and then burglarizes the home. A few hours later, into the evening, he breaks into the Covenant residence. He fatally shoots Chararong and rapes and beats Kinkead. Then he binds their 8-year-old son and forces the Kinkead to point at the valuables in the home. August the 6th, he breaks into Chris and Virginia Peterson's home. He shoots Virginia in the face and Chris in the neck. Chris tries to fight Richard, but he flees. Both survive the attack. August the 8th, he breaks into Sakina and Elias's Abonath's residence. He shoots Elias, handcuffs, beats, and sexually assaults Sakina while demanding jewelry. 10 days later, he breaks into Peter and Barbara Pan's residence, shoots Peter in the head, beats and sexually assaults Barbara before fatally shooting her. August 25th, 1985. Richard is identified as the Night Stalker. That evening, he breaks into Bill Cairns and Inez Erickson's home. He shoots Carnes 3 times in the head and then tells Inez he is the Night Stalker and must swear to Satan. He rapes her and then flees. A few hours before entering Bill Carnes and Inez Erickson's home, Richard tried to break into the Romeo residence. 13-year-old James Romeo Jr. heard Richard trying to break in and woke his parents. Richard ended up fleeing, but the family was able to make out the license plate and the model of the car. For many years, it was believed that Jenny Viscow was the Night Stalker's first victim. But after DNA evidence in 2009, it was discovered that his actual first victim was 9-year-old Mei Leung. She was found in the basement of a hotel, stabbed to death, sexually assaulted, and hung from a pipe. On August 31st, 1985, Richard was finally caught. After returning from Tucson, Arizona, his mugshot was all over the local newspapers, which he notices. He attempted to carjack a woman, but bystanders stopped him and then held him captive until the police were able to arrive and arrest him.
Richard Ramirez's obsession with Satan and his belief that he was being protected by evil forces while acting out these gruesome crimes. An example of how comfortable Richard was with killing someone is during the night that he killed Peter Pan and raped his wife Barbara Pan. He ate food from in their fridge, then threw up on the kitchen floor. He then masturbated on the living room floor and wrote a satanic symbol on the wall, leaving his mark behind proudly. Another time he left a pentagram written with lipstick on the wall, and another carved into the leg of a victim. Police were concerned that it might be a copycat of Charles Manson, as this was similar to their crime scenes. Moving forward, he used more pentagrams as his mark to leave behind, and he would even have his victims swear to Satan instead of God. Furthermore, in court, he held up a pentagram after pleading not guilty and said, "Hail Satan."
For Richard Ramirez risk factors, we singled out child abuse as the main factor to his dark and twisted fantasies. Due to the abuse Richard suffered as a child, he was forced into the life of killing and has no other normal. We saw that in his early life information, where his uncle basically threw him into the twisted pictures and stuff as just a young kid, and also through the abuse he suffered through his actual close family, like parents and etc. Richard Ramirez never really had a chance at a normal life, just through the head injuries and the dark family past. He was just bound to go in the wrong direction without the proper support. Some stats on child abuse. As many as 2/3 of people being in treatment for drug abuse reported they were abused or neglected as children. Another one is 14% of all men in prison and 36% of women in prison in the USA were abused as children, which is about twice the frequency seen in the general population. Children who experience child abuse and neglect are about 9 times more likely to become involved in criminal activity. There was a study done to determine the prevalence of childhood abuse on 50 serial killers who killed for sexual gratification, otherwise known as lust killers. For serial killers, the prevalence of physical abuse was 36%, sexual abuse was 26%, and psychological abuse was 50%. Neglect was equally prevalent in the serial killer, which was 18%, and the societal norm for populations. This study shows that basically abuse is the most common, if not like at least one of the most common reasons why people often grow up into possible monsters that kill for sexual gratification, just like Richard Ramirez has done.